Welcome, everyone. In today's NBS News Show, we will cover a number of recent topics, ranging from the recent election to recent regional assembly legislation. Today's guests include former Vice Delegate and current Security Counselor Artemis,
Hello.
former Delegate, current Chief of Staff for External Affairs and Security Counselor Ghost,
Hey.
Minister of WA Affairs Cretox,
Hello.
former Delegate, Chief of Staff of Internal Affairs and Lead RP Mod Prydania,
Yellow.
and current Vice Delegate Dreadton.
Greetings.
As always, no opinions expressed in this show officially represent views of the government. So with that said, let's get started. The first topic of discussion today is the most recent general election. What are you guys' thoughts on the tight race between Tlams and Praetor, as well as the other elections, such as for Speaker?
I thought it was great to see the tight race between Tlams and Praetor. I think, again, kind of just speaks to the strength of TNP democracy that, we had, two really good choices, and it was a very tight race, and it was just, I thought, a great sign for our region, honestly. And then, of course, down the ticket, there were some unfortunate aspects, but the top of the ticket, I thought was very solid, and it was a good election.
It was a very strong slate of candidates for delegate, as well as the other positions that were out there. I mean, like it was just said, it is a strong display of the democracy in TNP and how much value we place in our elections and our democratic process. And I'm looking forward to seeing the work that's going to be done this term, as well as the work that's going to be done in future terms.
What did you think was the most prominent difference between Praetor's and Tlams' campaign?
Honestly, I think they were more similar than different. Both of them, they didn't have the exact same background, but both of them kind of came from a position of, we've been in the region a while, we've served in a number of positions, we know how it works, and we believe that we can do the job of delegate. They very I hesitate to use this word because it could be construed as a negative, although I actually mean it in a completely positive sense, is that it was kind of they're both very technocratic candidates, just people who the citizens could trust with the top spot. I thought that broadly, the differences, honestly, I don't mean to insult either of them, but the differences I thought were kind of superficial to the fact that we just had two really strong candidates who kind of just exemplified the best of what TNP could do at the top levels.
And then I guess that leads into, once Tlams won the election, it's been about a month now into his term. How do you think he's doing so far, and what can we improve upon? And don't talk about radio. I know I've been a little lax.
I think we're off to a great start with our regional governments and the cabinet. Slums did do something a little bit different than previous terms. He appointed two chiefs of staff, which I thought was an interesting play, and I'm very interested to see how that works out in the long run. Separating the duties of the chief of staff, one focusing on external affairs, and one focusing on the internal workings of the region. So I'm very interested to see how that dynamic works with the delegates, the chiefs of staff, and then the delegates cabinet. Overall, it's very exciting to see the work that's being done in all aspects of the community, and it's really taken off, I think, and been going full force ahead.
Given that we have both of our chiefs of staff here today, our external and our internal affairs with Ghost and Prydania. I guess I'll ask the two of you, what do you see your role as chief of staff to be, and how do you serve the region best in that role? And we'll start with Ghost for external affairs.
I think it's all about the synergy of having the different ministries working together and finding the lines that connect them. That's always been an approach that I thought was best to try, and I've always appreciated delegate platforms that show how you can link together what sometimes can be very separate ministries and that do very distinct things and find common areas where everybody can kind of work on collaborative projects and finding all the best projects for that to be targeted, basically. Like the cards would be a really great example of that, and I think that was a particular strength in Tilam's campaign. I know I'm kind of going back to that old question a little bit, but I was thinking about it. You know, you had candidates who had very specific strengths and areas that they were known for, and I think that they showed that they could go much broader and cover a lot more ground. And I was particularly impressed with Tilam's and how much knowledge he had about the different areas and the vision that he had for it. And I think that's what the chiefs of staff are supposed to do. Are supposed to translate that vision into actual concrete things and projects, like this cards thing with the rewards and how every single ministry can find a way to now implement cards, and it kind of replaces the point systems and just finding things like that the different ministries can work together more often, and we just kind of have to spearhead that. I mean, for me, it's the external ones. It's foreign affairs, World Assembly, that kind of thing. But that's kind of what we're aiming to do. And I don't want to speak for Pry, but I think it's probably a similar situation there.
Go for it, Pry.
No. So yeah, what Ghost said is absolutely correct. It's the same thing on my end. Just finding the threads that link everything together and executing the delegate's vision. On my end, we've got a bit of cards, we've got home affairs, comms, RP, radio. Culture, radio. But just to give an example, we're working on some NBS RP shows, right? And so that is necessitating a lot of collaboration between radio and culture. So it is really just sort of finding those through lines and making sure that everything is sort of humming along nicely.
Right. Actually, there's real business that I have to speak with you about, because given that Praetor's in the chat here, I promised that I would work with him on basically cards-based NBS tutorials, and I haven't gotten around to doing that. So maybe I can ask you to help facilitate that as well.
Ooh, sounds fun.
Yeah. Do you typically wait for ministers to reach out for you with ideas, or do you find yourselves in a position where you are making sure that people get in touch with each other and being a little bit more, you're taking more of the initiative yourself?
For me, it's really a combination of the two. The delegate has a vision, obviously, and how much of that vision he sort of leaves in the hands of Ghosts and myself. It varies from project to project, but broadly, the delegate has a vision, and we're there to execute it. And so there are some projects that necessitate a hands-on assertive approach where you go to the ministers and you go, okay, so here is what we need to be doing. But I mean, honestly, then sometimes there are cases where, to be frank, Telom's did a pretty good job filling out the cabinet, where the ministers themselves kind of take that initiative, and to the point where, I will show up and I'll be like, okay, what needs to be done? And it's like, no, we're good. And I'm like, oh, okay, keep me up to date. Make sure everything's going forward. And then there's always those great cases where people within the ministries, be it the ministers themselves or the deputy ministers or the ministry staff members, will sometimes come up and be like, hey, I have an idea. And in that case, you kind of play more of at least for me, I play more. I don't want to speak for Ghost, but like when people come to me with ideas, right, and they're like, oh, can we do this? There's running it by the delegate and assuming that the delegate is okay with it. Then it's more me kind of sitting back and going, okay, this is your vision. How do you want to play this? And that usually does involve a more laid back approach on my end. So it really just depends, for me at least, on whatever the project happens to be.
Did you have a similar approach, Ghost?
If it's working like intended, at least that my vision of how it should go, we really do want the ministers to take the lead on everything. They are chosen to run their various ministries. Speaking for myself, I feel that the chief of staff role, as it's kind of evolved over the last few terms, we're definitely just trying to keep track of everything and keep everything organized. But as long as the ministers are on task and doing what they're supposed to be doing, and if the delegate can directly step in, it does render the chiefs of staff a little superfluous at times. But that's all really for the best. We are support. We're making sure everything's going smoothly, and if we're really stepping in, there might be people are really busy or the projects are really intense or need a lot of hands, and that's exactly why we're there. We're to make sure that stuff gets done correctly, and we're kind of trying something. I don't really know if it's fair to say that it's new, but this idea of separating the ministries into kind of a broad internal versus external, and focusing even more on just a select few ministries and keeping the synergy going. I think that TLOMS has a vision that's going to be very explicit in kind of mingling the ministries, so it almost kind of turns into like a cohesive unit, and we just have these two spheres. And figuring out how to do that consistently and keep the organization going that way, that's kind of the challenge, and that's what we're there to figure out if it's feasible to do that going forward. So really, it's just important that the ministers are taking point on everything whenever possible, and we're kind of like a safety net in my view. That's kind of our big role there. And TLOMS can't split himself into three pieces. He can't always be on at all hours. So it helps to have additional sets of hands and eyes, make sure everything's going forward the way it's supposed to. So that's how I see it anyway.
Right, that makes sense. Speaking about the ministers themselves, I know that Prydania already mentioned that he thought TLOMS' picks were pretty strong, but for the whole group, were there any surprises? Did you expect at any point that someone else would get the top job for a given ministry, and or was it pretty predictable who would get these positions?
I thought that the Minister of Foreign Affairs selection was a surprise, a pleasant surprise to be sure. I don't want to badmouth anyone. I wasn't going who the hell, but no, it was it wasn't what I expected, but that's a good thing. But all in all, I thought it was a very solid slate of people. Having served as delegate last term, I see a lot of people either who carried on, or if not carried on, still kind of working in the same areas. The one that comes to mind, is Cretox, who was deputy WA Affairs Minister under me last term. And Cretox did a very fantastic job as the go-to deputy in that ministry. And so it's not a surprise to see them in that spot as the minister, but it is one of those cases where it's like, oh, well, all right, that's a pretty damn solid pick. But I'd say that the Foreign Affairs was the biggest shock on my end.
Well, that's interesting, because I thought Sanjurica made perfect sense, kind of along the same lines Cretox, but I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs last term, so I guess I'd have a better idea of how that was going.
Yeah,
but he was really essential to keeping the backbone of the ministry going, and I'm really glad to see that the office has that continuity, because Foreign Affairs too often in the past kind of changed hands very dramatically from minister to minister, and I like to see that there's a lot more structure and stability in the office, going back several terms now, where we've actually built a pretty good stable of talent. And I always like to see when that talent gets to rise and it gets their turn to show us what they can do at the top. So I was not surprised by that myself, but I guess I could see how some people might be. And that's a challenge going forward, is making sure Foreign Affairs is a little more visible and people kind of have a better idea what's going on, because so often we can kind of be off in our own little bubble looking out, and a little bit more inward probably wouldn't hurt. So I think Sanjurica can do that. And the other picks, I like the number of new names that we're seeing in the ministries. It's important to keep experienced ministers who can keep things running, like in home affairs, but that seemed a little less than usual this term, which I thought was refreshing. And I think no matter who won delegate, that was going to be the case. So glad to see that that's what happened.
You also have old hands returning with BMW Surfer and Communications.
Yeah, no. BMW was a very good choice. Well, like I said, I thought the entire slate was pretty strong. So no real alarm bells, but it was a pleasant surprise to see BMW come back.
So my next question would be back to one of the first things that I noticed that was one of the differences between Praetor's and Tlom's campaigns, is that Praetor always has the idea that rather than directly appointing ministers, to basically have like an application-based system that starts after the beginning of the term. And I don't want to rehash the election or rehash old ideas like that, but I do want to sort of gauge your thoughts on that matter, and sort of why you either like or dislike that idea.
Judging just from my own experiences as delegate, after I was elected, hell, even before I was officially announced as the winner, I had people dropping into my DM box being like, hey, like, I know you might have someone in mind, but if not, consider me, and here's everything I've done. And I don't mean to disparage anyone, because a lot of very talented people popped into my DM box and, listed their resumes, and it was actually a bit of a challenging experience for me to have this glut of talented people and then have to narrow it down to a cabinet. But I mean, in practical terms, what Praetor was suggesting was something that I had to deal with for a number of cabinet positions, a number of ministries, and I don't think I'm an outlier in that regard. I mean, I've only run for delegate once, so but I think I can say with a degree of confidence that my experience was not abnormal. And so, to a degree, what Praetor was describing already, kind of exists. You get people who, reach out to you and they say, hey, I would be interested in this ministry, and here's why I think I'd be good at it. And this is all despite the fact that, almost every candidate will list a, if elected, here's my ideal cabinet sort of situation. So, what Praetor again was suggesting was a sort of a codification of something that I think just naturally occurs in the system. Whether or not that is a good thing or not is a matter of debate, as we saw during the election. I'm actually kind of two minds on it. And I keep going back and forth in my head. There are some days where I think, yeah, that would be a really good idea. Streamline everything, get everyone's, name down, go over applications, choose the best person. On the other hand, sometimes I start thinking like, if you're going to run for delegate, you should be thinking about these ahead of time. You should have just, an ideal set of who you'd like to work with. And do we really need more bureaucracy in this place? So, I mean, I kind of go back and forth on it, honestly. And I thought that was actually a really interesting debate in the election, was how this idea sat. But I will say that I thought it was very interesting, and it's certainly something that has a lot of merit, because, as I said, this kind of thing already happens.
I saw it as a signal. The key difference being that nobody going into the election was already picked. There were no preconceived notions. It was basically all comers will be considered, and there's no commitments to anyone. And a lot of times, it's like Price said, that going into the delegate race, you kind of have an idea of who you're going to pick, but people can surprise you, and you make that commitment to take a little bit of time and take in any name who comes and asks to be considered. You might find some surprising people, get an idea of who's really interested in serving, people who maybe were too afraid to come forward. But ultimately, the delegate still, is going to make the picks, and that's the part that doesn't change. And they're going to pick, the best people. And I imagine there's still going to be some kind of mix of more experienced people and people who are newer. But it signals a greater willingness and a greater expectation that there's going to be fresher faces. And like I said before, you're seeing mostly fresher faces in this cabinet with TLOMs, and TLOMs did not do the application method. So you can certainly get that blend no matter which approach you take. It's more of a signaling principles and priorities, the way I read it anyway.
Absolutely. I found the primary benefit to this proposed application system to be that you can get some fresh faces, some aspiring applicants, some people who may not necessarily be appointed to minister positions, but may nevertheless receive deputy positions, or who would be considered for other things. Simply, it creates a more formalized way for people to take initiative and to reach out.
Right, rather than relying on basically them taking that initiative in private with a sort of a DM structure before the election actually occurs. In my experience personally, I share more of a view like Prydania has mentioned, where I am sort of two minds, where on the one hand I have a very good idea of who I want to serve with, who I think I'll work well with, who I think is qualified and ready and prepared for the position. But on the other hand, there's also always that possibility that I'm not considering everyone, or that the people that I'm considering I have, gotten wrong in some way or another and aren't in fact ideal for the position. And, having a sort of a longer process like that might make some amount of sense. The only thing I'm concerned with is that, that sort of necessitates starting the term a little bit late. And so that's why I like having people just reach out. So like if you're, interested in being Minister of Defense, like reach out to the candidate, because I think, that's pretty much the only way that they're going to be considering you, unless they already are considering you. Yeah. Anyway, so I guess we'll move on from the delegacy and the minister picks and whatnot. I guess the only thing that I would mention there is the Ministry of Cards is brand new, and I'm personally extremely proud of the work that Praetor and DGS has, and actually 9003 as well, have done to bring cards to the forefront of TNP. And I think it's great that they are a ministry now. But what are your thoughts? Is it relevant enough to this point that the ministry exists, or should it have remained sort of as a project for the Security Council and whatnot to promote these sort of initiatives?
I
Well, I
think
first would like.
I'll go with Artemis.
I would first like to say I would also think we should include R3 Renaissance.
Oh, of course, I
R3N
can't.
in the cards discussion. They've been a phenomenal help to the region and with our cards and farming and was it TNL?
Yep. I didn't mean to not include him. There's plenty of people who've been involved, but he's definitely had an absolutely critical role.
I would have to agree on that. And I applaud the delegate taking the initiative, creating the cards. First, we started off with the Cards Guild. Now we have cards as its own ministry. And I think that's an important step in solidifying the importance of cards to the region. And I'm happy that it's taking on a life of its own, because before it was solely related to the Security Council, the World Assembly Development Program awards, and us incentivizing that. And we were seeing the benefits. We saw the benefits of that incentive And I applaud the delegates who created the Card Guild, continued the Card Guild, and turned it into its own ministry to further incentivize not only those participating with the WADP, but incentivizing and awarding participation in the region as a whole.
I think one of the coolest upcoming projects is, as both Pry and Ghost already mentioned, the points-based system that goes across all of the different ministries that's being developed, that's going to probably replace the existing Home Affairs and radio cards programs, but sort of integrate it all and modernize the system so that basically all the ministries are on the same page, and that participation in one ministry can sort of equate to participation in another to get those incentives.
Make no mistake, it's just an excuse for Ghost and I to go 10 points to Gryffindor.
Oh, goodness.
But yeah, no, cards has been fantastic. I'm very happy to see it. I mentioned in the Drop in the Ocean event that I could very easily see cards becoming its own ministry in the future, and I didn't expect it to be the very next term, but it was a pleasant surprise to see. And having been there as Minister of Culture when it was founded, and kind of seeing it grow and seeing all the work that everyone put into it, it's just it on one hand, I didn't expect it to happen so soon, but on the other, now that it has, I'm glad that it happened when it did, because it's ready.
It's about time. And DGES is just phenomenal. I've been blown away by the very long, detailed reports and bullet point lists. And I something about the culture of cards is that they're very detail oriented people there, and they're perfect to be running a ministry. And it's just like you see it all, and it just fits in perfectly with all the other ministries. It's vintage TMP, and I think we're already known very well for our cards program across the game, and I think cards is definitely up there with WA as one of the key TMP exclusive features, basically, that we just do that better than most anyone else. And I'm very proud of that, and I'm glad that the potential that cards had since it started is being realized. And we can see from the inception of the idea to now, just that journey it's gone on. It's really cool. And
I mean,
I've been rooting for cards, so I'm really glad to see we're here.
I mean, when cards first came to nation states, I mean, it was supposed to be a temporary thing, and it became so popular that NS had to commit to making it a full-time thing. And that journey from temporary thing to full-time thing took a bit longer than I think everyone would have liked, but once it became a permanent feature, it was inevitable that it would create a following, and that following would be engaged, and they'd be excited about it, and they'd be dedicated. So I know that a lot of regions in this game, a lot of the really big power mover regions in this game, at least, tend to operate kind of a bit slowly when it comes to change. But in retrospect, it was almost inevitable that we'd get here. That once this became a permanent feature, there would be a community dedicated to it, and there would be excitement over it. And we are now, and so to be one of the regions that's sort of getting ahead of this now, I think is a great testament to TNP.
It's all in the cards, as they say.
Damn
I'm really hoping that becomes the motto.
God damn it, Fiji, that was awful.
How do you say that in Latin, by the way?
I don't know, and I don't even know how you're going to bother translating that. I think it just should be, it's all in the cards.
I think people should know what the Latin expressions are, because that's what's on the seal. So
yeah, when I was doing
minor
the Ministry
quibble on
of
my
Radio
part.
thing, I really thought about that because I wanted to conform to it, right? But
okay, so I was gonna chime in with a Google translation.
no, you can't trust that. You can't trust that.
It is even worse, and suspected. It just left in the cards as in the cards. It didn't even
Oh
bother.
Well, I'm sure if we go to, who is it, GBM, and who are our translators? COE maybe might know.
Laws might know, actually. He is,
Yep.
he's one of those Latin scholars, so.
All right, well, we'll have to ask them when the time comes. So, as I was mentioning earlier, we'll transition away from talking about the delegacy and the ministries to, I want to briefly mention the vice delegate race as well. We have the former vice delegate Artemis here, as well as current vice delegate Dreadton. And I just want to know from you, Dreadton, you've been a little quieter in the show so far. How do you think the transition has been going? And how do you think you're settling into the role?
It's been a different experience than I've been used to. But fortunately, the Security Council has been answering the 1,000,001 pings that I send to them on a daily basis. So it's going actually rather well.
What did you think of the election process? I believe at first you were pretty much unopposed, but by the time voting rolled around, we had Bomberino presenting a fairly serious campaign. What did you think of his ideas for the role?
His ideas were good. What I liked about his campaign, it showed how strong of a player he could be when he puts his mind to it. It gave the region a bit of insight to what we have been seeing on the executive staff and the MPA, the serious Bob and not the jokester Bob. I thought that was a good face for the region to see. It showed that he's got good, strong potential in future elections.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that's been facing the Security Council in the last few terms, as well as one of the factors that definitely played a role in this election, has been sort of increased public attention to the Security Council, specifically in our ability to have some amount of transparency in our decision making. What and this is not just a question for Dreadton or Artemis, but for the group as a whole as well. What were your opinions of the spat of regional assembly legislation that pertained to the Security Council recently? There were two bills, the GOAT Act and secondly Artemis's North Pacific Security Disclosure Act. And I guess I would just want to gauge opinion on those and see how we feel with sort of that process going forward.
No, I guess I'll pick up that hot potato.
There was a moment of silence there for a second.
Seeing as I vetoed the GOAT Act and dealt with all of that, that was a fun time.
Yeah, okay. Let's hear your stance on that, so that I know you shared your opinion.
Stance. I explained my stance when I did.
All right. Well, I won't make you restate it again.
Well, so and it was a very tough situation for me because at first, when kind of going through the GOAT Act, kind of going through the GOAT Act's history in the Regional Assembly, I was broadly for it. And I even admitted in an interview that, yeah, I intend to sign it. Thing is that some time passed between that interview and it actually arriving on my desk. And in that time, I had, the doubts that I had kind of became amplified in my mind. I started thinking on them more. I started thinking on the legislation more and what I thought it meant. And it got to a point where I I didn't think that that was the best manifestation of the idea. And I even said when I vetoed it that I wasn't vetoing the idea, and I asked, Praetor, who authored the Goat Act, to reach out to the Security Council, work with them, and see if there could be a better version of this idea that incorporated the ideas, what I thought were the very real concerns of the Security Council at the time. And I think that Artemis's legislation that followed was a very good example of that. I'm very happy how that process turned out, because it was what I wanted to see. I wanted to see the people, not Praetor, obviously, because he was the one who wrote the Goat Act, but Praetor and the people who went to bat for it as well. I wanted to see that engagement with that group who had very real concerns, engage with the Security Council who had very real concerns. And I think that the process going forward as it is now is at a place where I think that compromise is being reached, and I think we're in a good spot. So I'm very happy with how the whole thing went through. And it was a harrowing situation on my end personally, but I think that all in all, it kind of worked out well for the region as a whole, because I think that the concerns of people who are looking for transparency are going to be met, and I think the concerns of the Security Council, who again, they have the right to a realistic degree of secrecy and a realistic degree of discretion within their chamber. That those concerns are being met. It wasn't necessarily always a pretty road to get there. The scenery wasn't always nice, but we're getting to a good destination regardless.
Artemis, as sitting vice delegate at the time when these events went down, and as author of the signed into law North Pacific Security Disclosure Act, what made you...
It wasn't signed into law, technically.
Right.
Yeah.
It just passed its time for the delegates to either sign it or to veto it. So,
but doesn't okay. So misnomer. It does mean that it is law now, though, right? Because
the current law.
Yes, it is law.
Right. I was 100% sure that it was law. I thought that it had been signed, but okay.
It just hasn't been signed, but it passed into law due to the weak law.
That's weird. I'm surprised Slom's didn't put his signature on that. Huh. Okay.
I can't speak for him on that, but talking on this law, I will say, as a Security Council, we did fail to engage with the first proposal of the Goat Act. We did not do our diligence or our duty in responding and expressing our concerns about what we saw the issues with the Goat Act until after it was already out of vote. That was a failure on our part, and we acknowledged that we failed on that part. With the Security Act that is now law, it still maintains a level of disclosure that was sought after by the Goat Act, but it also addresses the concerns that we as a Security Council had, maintaining security of our operations, as well as protecting real life information of anything that might have been disclosed.
And privacy as well, because for many years, Security Council was not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and everyone there was speaking with the assumption that these were private correspondences that would not be potentially released. And for the most part, ultimately, the threads do eventually get moved to the archives and can be read. And it's very dry reading in, I'd say, well over 95% of the time. So Part of, I think, the reason why the Security Council is a little slower to respond is just that a lot of this seemed kind of hyperbolic, and there was a lot more drama in the entire process than I think was necessary. But more communication absolutely should have happened, and I appreciate that Prydania gave us a chance to have those concerns, those very real concerns, heard. And it is a compromise because former members of the Security Council still can expect that level of privacy, but current members, sitting members, we're going to have to accept that now this stuff is potentially disclosed.
Just speaking as someone, as a former delegate, just not necessarily Security Council related, but it is relevant to the discussion, which is to say that hypothetically, as someone who served as Minister of Culture for a year, served as delegate for a term, and is now one of 2 chiefs of staff, that, hypothetically, if you completely disclosed the Executive Council discussions, and you disclosed all of it and gave it to the region as a whole to read, people would be dreadfully disappointed. A lot of the stuff that tends to go on, behind certain layers of privacy, honestly, is kind of, well, Ghost said it, it's dry. I mean, yeah, there are juicy bits, but usually the juicy bits in these places tend to correlate to major regional happenings where most of the relevant info gets shared with the region in general anyway. Like, if you were to disclose, if you were to bring out into the open the logs of the Executive Council discussions that happened during the CCD attempted infiltration from McMasterdonia's last term, and you brought those discussions out into the open, the citizenry would gain absolutely nothing from those discussions that McMasterdonia didn't share with the region as a whole as part of his debriefing as delegate. So
I mean, I agree with you on principle there, that like those are fairly boring logs, but like, as just speaking from like a devil's advocacy position, I'm just gonna say, like, I really don't think it matters what the perceived content of the logs are, just that if the public has an interest in them, that being more communicative rather than less communicative is probably just the best policy. And that applies both to the Executive Council and to the Security Council going forward as well. About communication, I think we can all just do better in that regard. Doesn't even have to be transparency so much as just sharing our thoughts when it matters. So I guess this is probably a good time to move into what was the next point, which is really very similar to the Security Council, which is former English colony just got accepted to become a new old member of the Security Council. And I guess what I wanted to ask is, to our other Security Council members here, what do you think makes FEC, a perfect fit for the Security Council again? And what do you look for in Security Council applications? Artemis, I think you're intimately familiar with the process as a former vice delegate. I actually, Ghost too, if you want to chip in, or Dreadton. It just occurred to me there's 3 vice delegates here.
My experience with Security Council applications was taking the oath and opening up a vote.
Hey man, that's all it takes.
That's. I would say we're excited to have former English colonies joining the Security Council. They've been involved with the region a very long time, served on the Security Council in the past, and have served in many different positions within the community. They have the skill, they have the experience, they have the dedication to the region. All 3 of these are some of the major areas that we look at when evaluating potential applicants. for those who apply to the Security Council. We want to see all those things. We want to see your dedication to the region. We want to see you get involved with the region, and we want you to see you make build your name and reputation within the region, because the primary pillar of the Security Council is trust. And we want to see that you have the trust of your fellow region mates to help secure and defend the North Pacific, which is a very important role, and it requires a level of trust from your region mates.
Yep, I echo all of that. I'd say it's fair to say that she has more experience than I do from, back in the day. So the experience absolutely on lock. As one of the more active admins that we've seen when she has been around, and she's been back for a while now. Again, I have no doubt we've got the trust already built in there, and this, I'm happy to say, is just one of those no-brainer decisions that come along every once in a while, and everyone kind of appreciates just how easy it is. And I just don't think that's in doubt, or thankfully not controversial. And obviously not every applicant's going to be like that. Somebody who has been around for years and has done a little bit of everything, been a former delegate, been a former security counselor, been in a forum admin. But even the newer people, they show that they can be trusted, that they had some responsibility, some role of importance that people decided to give them a chance to do, and they did their job faithfully and well, and they are dedicated, and you can trust that they're sincere and that they are in it for the right reasons and they care, and you don't have to worry about what they might do, or that there'd be any kind of discord involved in their involvement. Then definitely worth considering. And then it's just a question of how new are they, how much time can you take for granted that that's going to be a reliable pattern, because patterns do take time to develop. So that's why it's a little harder for newer people, or people who maybe aren't so new but haven't been around doing these active things. They've been around but on the fringes. They're just, you see them around, you know their name, but you don't really know what they can do because they haven't really stepped up. It can be a little hard to judge sometimes, and that part I think confuses some people, because someone's been in the region for a very long time, but they haven't really been put to the test yet. That has to happen before at least me on the Security Council that I'm comfortable moving them forward. So I think I can reliably speak for most of the other members on that point.
I completely agree on that. It's
As do I.
If someone who's been in the region a very long time, but they just have not been involved with the community, I just don't see them being a productive member of the Security Council. That to me, that's a big sticking point for me. Obviously, is I want to see you being active and being involved, and not just doing it for you come in, you're here for a month, and you're super active, and then you apply to join the Security Council. For me, I'm not that comfortable just saying, okay, yeah, I can support this. I need to know more about that person. I need to know where their dedication lies, why they're wanting to do this. And if we tell them no, what are they going to do then? Are they going to take to our reasoning for saying no to them to heart and look to improve themselves, or are they just going to move on somewhere else?
I think that's actually probably one of the reasons why I'm particularly proud of Ethnon's appointment to the Security Council a while back, which was we had originally rejected his application for basically those grounds, not having been active enough in the community, and we had to see changes. And then when he ultimately became Minister of Home Affairs and showed up, basically, it was worth reconsidering. So let's start talking about more recent events. On the topics list, we have the 2020 World Assembly Symposium in retrospect. And I guess the two people I want to ask most here are Ghost, because you were the one who ran the first World Assembly Symposium, and also Cretox, our current Minister of WA Affairs. How did you guys think the event went? What went well? What could have done better? And how can we improve it for the future?
I think I'm going to defer to Cretox first because I don't want to color his impressions with mine and my knowledge of the first one. So I'll let him go first.
Oh yes, certainly. Let's start with a blank slate. So I have no memory of the first symposium, obviously, because I was not in the region at that time. However, what I can say about this second symposium is that it was run incredibly well at an administrative level. Moreover, in Macedonia, everyone involved in organizing this event did an impeccable job, and I think that it really fulfilled its purpose quite well. That said, the one area I can really point to as using some improvement for the future is advertising, reaching out to upper regions, and simply raising awareness about this event going on. When this event was happening, I personally reached out to TEP, to Europai, I believe, because these regions did not really have that much knowledge that the event was going on. So, but that's really the one area I can point to. Everything else I would say was done pretty impeccably.
I think the Ministry of Communications is also going to republish some of the essay work that was done for the symposium in the next edition of the Northern Lights, which should be interesting.
Yes, indeed. For this edition, it'll be the four guest essays that were submitted from Kenmoria, IA, LD, and Maui. So that should be interesting to read. We're basically finished with that at this point. It's a matter of publishing it.
If that's all you have to say on the matter, then Ghost, go for it. What do you have to say in terms of the comparison between the two events?
Well, you hit on what I think was the most important difference. We seem to have more of an effort in terms of the essay writing, and this doesn't really hit on, I guess, as directly in what Cretox just said, but we had more forum involvement in the event this time. There was an effort to put the essays out there as part of the symposium. Last time when we did the TNL issue for the symposium to kind of coincide with it, we didn't really get to touch on those essays during the event itself. And I thought that was a little bit of a missed opportunity. So I liked that there was more of a chance to engage with the authors and those ideas as part of the event. It's kind of hard to compare to the first because it was kind of a first of its kind, had a lot more buzz in GP. There was more people coming in to listen and participate in it. And we had so much interest that we actually were going to extend it another weekend, which in retrospect was kind of a mistake because we really didn't have a lot of material left, and the interest just did not sustain itself that long. So the changes in the second one definitely learned from the past. I think we improved in all the areas that we should have. We kept the discussion open a little longer, but we spaced them out. We didn't have as many things, and we did a lot of combinations. We had a lot of topics that were too similar, I thought, last time. So the new symposium kind of combined them into one mega topic, and I think the discussions were better for it. I wish that it had been better attended, but I feel that that's kind of true for most of the events this year. It's just one of those things of timing. So we didn't have nearly as many of the WA faces we had last time. Some of them just weren't around, but I think a little more advanced notice might have helped the event run better and getting the word out. I think the word got out better last time, but we didn't have the experience of the event, so we couldn't run it as smoothly as we would have liked. I found that the morning hours of the day tended to be the busiest, and I think that might have still been true in this event. But the times were pretty well spaced. I really can't fault Morva or any of the team for how they did it, because they addressed all the points they needed to, and it was a really solid event overall. We can improve in a few areas for a subsequent one, but for a second outing, I thought it was really good. And the essays, I think, were my favorite touch compared to last time and how we handled them. And I think we're going to be trying that model more often with TNL in general. I believe that's part of TLOM's plan long term for the publication. Outreach to the other authors, absolutely need to do more of that. We got really good content out of them, and I think in pretty much every case, that's what this issue is all about. It's bringing in those guest authors, and that's a model we can extend further. So I would agree with Cretox on that. We need to hit that harder and maybe even do more of it. Maybe do it more often. Don't make it as big of a production, and I think the events with more frequency and more foreign author involvement, I think it could be a pretty regular thing that is something we should aim for. There's a lot of potential there. I'd like to explore it. So
yeah, I definitely agree. With
that's my own
TNO in particular, that's an avenue that we have underexplored in the past. The only thing I would mention with regard to this TNO issue is that the articles were solicited for the WA symposium itself rather than for the publication, and so I had to sort of talk with BMW Surfer and TLOMS about it to make sure that we had basically consulted with those original authors again to make sure that they were okay with it being published in this format as well. And so now that we can move forward with that publication. And I have seen the work that has been done so far by BMW Surfer, Cretox, and the rest of the team, and it looks honestly fantastic. So I'm looking forward to seeing that published as well. Regarding the WA Affairs Ministry, Cretox, I am aware that you have basically put out a new spin on the previous sponsorship program with the World Assembly Accelerator program, and I would like you to, if you could, discuss the difference between those two programs, what you think you have improved upon for the Accelerator program, and if you could just talk about it a little bit overall, that would be great.
Oh, certainly. So the biggest shortfall that I found with the sponsorship program, as long-lived, I suppose, as it may have been, is that it tries to do too many things at once without doing any one thing quite well. What I mean by this is the sponsorship program solicits applications with finished drafts, with drafts in various stages of completion, and even simple ideas and concepts where no draft, no plan, and nothing along those lines exists at the moment. At the same time, the sponsorship program, it's currently archived, but if you even read over it, if you can give it a cursory examination, you can pretty easily tell that there are no concrete expectations from either party. It's we'll reach out, we'll give you lobbying opportunities, we'll help make your draft the best it can be, etc., etc. What I wanted to achieve with this iteration, the Accelerator program, is to refocus it on specifically drafts that are either nearly completed or that currently exist in some capacity on our forum, on the S forum, even in a Google Doc. The focus is on authors that already have a good idea of what they want to achieve and who already put the pen to paper. Simply to establish some mutual expectations from both sides that the WA ministry is, well, as you can see from the Accelerator program, I split it into two sections, the phase one, which is feedback, the phase two, which is ad-hold sponsorship. And the idea here was to engage with authors, both internal and foreign, and to provide them with targeted feedback so that they have something that they can concretely expect to get out of this program, while at the same time allowing us to officially sponsor drafts when we feel that they're ready for submission and when we feel that there is potential there. So I would say it trims down the process somewhat. It removes some unnecessary elements, such as the concepts that would be submitted. I recall some gold standard concepts, etc., that were never really going to go anywhere. And it adds additional nuance to the process as a whole that gives it some more flexibility.
You mentioned that the go for it. Sorry to
It's still, of
interrupt.
course, I believe in the first stage of the process. I still believe it's in the first day of it being out or so. We have not received any applications yet, and I'm interested to see how successful it will be in the future.
What I was going to say is you have mentioned in bold in the program actually that it's not just internal authors who can use the program, but you're also looking for external authors as well. My question is, would that sort of apply mostly to our wall allies, or is it really just any external author can look for revision and feedback within TNP itself?
That is really intended to apply to any external authors who are interested in soliciting our feedback and taking advantage of the program. One of the fascinating things about the WA compared to other areas of the game is just how universal it is between regions and what connections you can make with other authors, even if they aren't necessarily in the same region. So I firmly believe that engaging foreign authors with this program could be of benefit to TNP because it also gives those authors a bit of exposure to TNP. Perhaps in the future they work more closely with us. Perhaps they're encouraged to become staffers in the WA ministry. But it would give soliciting foreign offers would give them the benefit of taking advantage of TNP's WA resources and at the same time give us the advantage of engaging with promising offers.
Right, that makes sense. Is that something that you're going to be working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well about to make sure that they're advertising the program abroad?
Honestly, at this point, I'm mostly interested to find out if the program is functional before I begin outreach. I haven't even advertised it to WoW yet.
Fair enough. It's only I think you posted it earlier this very morning. So
Yes.
just jumping on the ball there a little bit. All right. Well, thank you for your thoughts on that. I wish the accelerator program the best, and I hope that it gets more responses than the sponsorship program did. So the last topic on our list of topics today is the most recent event, which was N Day, in which we joined the Potato Alliance. How do you guys think that event went in terms of our success and our planning in it? And how do you just answer that question? I don't know where I'm going with this.
Was anyone there besides me?
I was definitely there. I participated. I got
Oh yeah, you
body
participated all right.
slammed.
Yeah, you
Hey,
got
Praetor's here too.
somebody came after you. Yeah, and you didn't die, so our alliance was awesome because they prevented that from happening. That's nice.
I guess the
Only
question
8%
was.
radiation, PG. Good job.
I guess the question I'm really asking is less, did we have fun? Because I believe we did, but rather, how do you think this alliance was formed as opposed to in previous years in which we've allied with all the other Pacifics in Uppercut? Like, what were the differences, do you think, in terms of the alliance itself, and does that matter for our relationship with those regions?
Well, that's a loaded question for me because you know that the first end day after the April Fool's event happened when I was delegate, and I thought it was a great opportunity for cooperation with other regions. But you got to mix things up after a while. Can't do the same thing every time. 'Cause people do get tired of it and starts to strain. Uppercut was champion, and then it got destroyed utterly, totally, and maybe for all time in the previous event. So I wasn't really surprised that there wasn't as much enthusiasm for it, or that people wanted to try something else. And having, I had some trepidation about changing things because, I did love Uppercut and the experiences we had there. And the teams that we built, but we were always adding more people to it, and I think that makes things difficult. And having said that, maybe it's ironic that Potato Alliance had even more regions involved in it than Uppercut ever did, but for whatever reason, it was way more fun this year. I would say I loved every minute of it except for the first couple of hours. And I also didn't love being personally nuked out of existence, but it was fun. It was the most fun I've had on End Day in a very long time, and everybody that was part of it, I think, can agree that was awesome.
I think the
Almost
best
being
part of
destroyed
it,
and climbing out of the hole and being second place at the end.
right? Exactly.
It was
That's the
phenomenal.
experience that we had with Uppercut. I think 2 years ago, where we basically almost got destroyed by Augustine Alliance overnight, but then climbed back to first place. It's that comeback story that's really
Yeah, but
speaks
I think
volumes.
this comeback story was even greater because
We had
faction
literally
that
the
was
lowest
doing the
score in the
destroying,
game.
yeah, it was even more powerful and aggressive than AA was, and
We were even
uh,
first place for like a couple minutes there at the end, and then unfortunately,
yeah,
Augustine.
peaked a little too soon, I think.
We were so close. Yeah. Anyway, so
Selfishly, though, I like that we were able to take a bit of a step back. I felt like a lot of Uppercut management was there was expectations. The TMP was going to play a huge role in leading it, and of course we were happy to do so and proud of it. But it's different when you're along for the ride of other people and you're part of the command and part of the organization, but you uh, can rely on the fact that others are taking it a step further. And it was nice to kind of be in that passenger seat role, and maybe that also helped with why it was more fun. But uh, great team, great energy, great bunch of guys, and I think we did make some new friends. And there's always potential for FA outreach because of that. And I think we might get something out of that. But uh, it's nice to work with other players in a new environment and kind of see a different side of them. I think it always helps to humanize the other players a little bit more, and you don't get caught up in all the usual boring uh, divisions and lines that exist in the game, and got to forget that a little bit. I think that's always a good thing. But I had lots of fun, and I'm glad that you did too.
This was my first end day where I didn't get nuked out of existence in the first 12 hours. So it was extremely fun for me, and I got to nuke Praetor, and I got to nuke Cosmo, and a bunch of other people. So great time all around.
Always a good time to get to nuke others.
well, those are all the topics for discussion that I had in mind. Ghost, I do know that you spoke a little bit before the show about the next Z Day possibly being canceled or changed. Um,
Yeah, word on the streets, they don't want to do another Z Day because of COVID, and they're considering replacing it with something else, maybe End Day again. I just want to say for the record, I hope that doesn't happen. Even if they cancel Z Day, it would suck not to have an event, but we all need a break. That was pretty intense. It was fun, but it was intense and took a lot of work and effort, and we'd have to have that all ready to go in another month. I don't know if I want to do that again.
I kind of like the April Fool's Day events, and so I'm really hoping that we get something similar for what would be Z Day. But I also understand that creating new events like that is really time consuming and intensive, especially for moderation. And so I'd definitely understand if it doesn't happen.
Oh, they're not going to create a new event. The only reason End Day's on the table is because it's easy to
To just
flip the
restart that
switch
and
and
boom.
start the existing thing again. Yeah, but I love Z Day. I love End Day, but I love Z Day. I've done more of them. I think we always do well. It can be stressful in a different way, but um, I've had great memories doing Z Days, and I would love to do it again. If they don't do it, I get it, but I think that'd be a shame. And
I agree with the great memories part, but it's just it's been an event that's been rehashed so many times. I don't quite feel that way with End Day yet, just because I've only been a part of, I think, 3 End Days, maybe just 2. Um, No, 3. And I think it might be around for 4 years or something now. But, like, that's going to get old too. So I kind of want the variety of different events. I like original ideas and this kind of thing.
You know what would be
Sure.
You know what would be hilarious if they release Card Season 3 instead of Z-Day.
That would be cool. Might be a little
goodness.
soon.
Won't happen, but still funny.
But that's what I'm talking about. Like, Cards was a new idea that was originally an April Fool's Day event, right? If we could have new ideas like that more frequently, that'd be kind of neat. But yeah, huge burden on the mods, and I kind of understand that, probably won't happen. Anyway, if anyone has any final topics to discuss, feel free to propose them now. Otherwise, we'll wrap this up and call it an evening. I'm going to take that as a no. All right, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for participating. I will probably snip this up into half a dozen different segments to make it easy to consume for our viewers. But thank you all for listening, and have a nice evening. That was your NBS show.
Right.
Cue the music.
Do 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 do.
Be careful, Dreadton. Say that too much, and that might actually become our new theme music.